Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Your Forever Home, the podcast, Kitchen Design Essentials Season. We are up to episode 12. I think I've actually got myself a little bit confused in terms of how many episodes we've done. I was looking back over the weekend and saw that I'd actually done more than I thought I had. I think I doubled up on my numbers. So we're episode 12, just talking about kitchens. How amazing is that? And there's still lots more episodes to come. And it just goes to show you how much detail, how much thinking, and how much you need to know to be able to design a really amazing kitchen. And so today I'm going to share with you a little bit of nitty gritty around key measurements for your kitchen. So I'm going to talk about appliances. I'm going to talk about the kitchen triangle, bench tops, and your island bench and splashbacks. So stay tuned. You may need a pen and paper, but don't worry too much because you will be able to catch up with this later. I know a lot of people listen to podcasts in the car. I know I do too. And so there will be plenty of opportunity at some stage, I'm sure, for you to be able to note down these key measurements. And I'll also chat through why things are the way they are and what options you may have as we go through. So let's start. Key measurements in terms of your kitchen. The first thing I wanted to chat about was the triangle. We get asked about this a lot. Oh, what about the triangle? And how does the triangle work? And I think one of the key things to consider in the thinking about the triangle is not that you need to have a triangle per se, but there really needs to be a maximum of around 7 meters between the key areas of what you need to access in your kitchen. Now, those key areas are your sink, your fridge, and your stovetop and your oven. So they are the key areas that you need to access when you're preparing food. And so really, in essence, there needs to be a maximum when you add up walking between all those spaces. It really should be a maximum of about 7 meters. Now, that's just a guide. Obviously, things you need to be flexible in terms of the way your kitchen may be designed, but that really is the optimum in terms of making sure that you're not too far away from the key things that you need to access when you're preparing food. The other thing with the triangle is the essence is you need to be able to access things easily and move between those spaces easily. So the theory behind it is that you have a bench. When you open your fridge, you've got a bench close by where you can actually put items down once you get them out of the fridge. That you've got space next to your stovetop so that when you're preparing food, you've got an area where you can put things when you're cooking, but also when you're taking pans off. And that you're able to easily unpack the dishwasher. So you don't want your dishwasher so far away from where you actually need to put clean dishes in. And also that your dishwasher is close to the sink because those two elements are obviously related. You may rinse and then put things in the dishwasher, or, most people generally gravitate to putting their things in the sink. Not so great when you're trying to train your your kids. It doesn't belong in the sink, it goes in the dishwasher, but really those things need to be together. And then having space on either side of the sink. So for any sort of hand washing, for preparation and washing of vegetables and so forth. So the other thing you need to keep in mind when looking at your kitchen are the local regulations with regards to how close a water source can be next to electricity or close to electricity. So generally speaking, it's around 500 millimeters. Each state's different, but also it's not just the fact that each state is different, but the regulations change all the time. So make sure that you have got it designed within the regulations. You can't have a sink right next to an oven, next to a stovetop. So you just need to make sure that you've got your water source well away from your point of power. Let's talk about splashbacks. Now, there are regulations, and again, you'll need to check with the local building regulations of your area because they are different in all areas. So check the regulations in your state, but basically your splashback needs to be a minimum of 600 high between the stove and the overhead cupboards if it's an electric stove. When it's gas, you've actually got a flame. So it's actually the top of the rivet, so the top of where that point of the stove finishes, and the lowest point of your overhead cupboard. So don't get caught out that it could be just the base of the overhead cupboards. It could actually be the finger pull area, which is a little bit lower those spots need to be a minimum of 650 with gas, and it's the same with induction. So make sure you get that checked. Now, the other thing to consider with this, again, we work with our clients in this regard, is if you're working with a 6 or a 650 splashback, that may actually affect the splashback tile that you choose. So for example, if you've got a 3x6 tile and it's a 600 splashback, you're easily going to fit 2 tiles in there. If it's 650, it means that you're going to have a sliver. So these sorts of design details also need to be considered when you're looking at the splashback. It's actually meant with our clients, we've changed the splashback because the way the tiles were going to be cut meant that it wasn't going to be visually appealing. Cabinetry, and this is a big one. In terms of flow, and again, when we're doing a deep dive with our clients, we understand how many people are going to be using that kitchen. So that enables us to design specifically around how many people are going to be cooking or preparing food in that space at any one time. And that needs to be considered. Ideally, you need a minimum of 1 metre, and I mean a minimum of 1 metre between the rear bench top and your island bench. Now, if there's a fridge there, obviously opening and closing that fridge and an oven and so forth, really you'd want to have 1100 and ideally 1200. Now, don't go to the other end of the extreme and then have, 1500, 2 meters between those benches, because it means that there's too much space for you to easily be able to access things and turn around and place things on benches. So the ideal measurement is 1200 millimeters, but 1 meter is allowable. Now, if there are 2 cooks that are going to be preparing at any one time, we would then have a minimum of 1200 so that people can easily move around each other when they're preparing. Now, 1100 between the island bar and another seated diner. So what I often see on floor plans is that there is a dining table close to, or in parallel with the island bench, and I see that that's far too tight. You need to allow to have the chair of the dining table to be able to be pulled out and still be able to flow and walk between those spaces. But also if you've got stools there too on your island bench, they also need to have space to pull out and that people can still walk between them. So really you need a minimum of 1100 between the island bar, so the island bench, and that bar area, and any dining table that is parallel with that island bench. You need ideally 300 millimeters between the edge of a bench to the sink. So you don't want to have your sink so hard up against the edge of a bench spot that you've really got nowhere to put anything. So ideally we're looking at 30 centimeters minimum. I normally like to work with 500 to 600. And ideally you'd want to have your dishwasher 500 millimeters from the corner, and then you can have a small cupboard there. That's not hard and fast. We often do design kitchens where the dishwasher is at the end. That's okay as well. Ideally, again, and I'm all talking in ideals, that you've got at least 30 to 40 centimeters. I've flipped over my metrics now, or my measurements, so let's talk millimeters, 300 to 400 millimeters on either side of your stovetop. Now, this may have an impact on if you're having a wall oven or not. Just recently, actually last week, we were working with designing a kitchen for a client, and they really wanted a wall oven. And what we showed them was if they had the wall oven and their stovetop was next to it, they were going to have about 20 centimeters on either side of that stovetop. And that's really not ideal. If you think about the food that you need to prepare and what you need to have next to you when you're cooking, it really is not enough. And once we showed them then the design with having the oven underneath, so a freestanding oven, and that allowed them to have at least 400 millimeters on either side of their stovetop, they actually went with that option. They could see the functionality and the benefit being able to move around and cook more easily with not having the wall oven. So really make sure you're looking at all the options. Standard bench height is 900. And when I say that's standard, it is standard, but hey, we're talking about your forever home. So there's absolutely no reason if you're tall that you can have that high. Just recently we designed a kitchen and we made that 950. So that, it was just that little bit, that extra 5 centimeters makes such a big difference in terms of not having to lean over so much and getting a sore back. And I'm a big believer that people often say to me, oh, but what about when we go and sell it and they're short? Well, hey, you are building your forever home. And I say it time and time again. So make sure you're designing it for you. Standard bench depth, we get asked this a lot, is 600. Sometimes we actually make it deeper. It may be that you've got a really big sink that's a lot deeper than normal, and depending on where your taps are going to be, that may need to be deeper. Sometimes we're using retractable doors and using a corner pantry, and that also needs to be deep for that reason as well. But I'm not going to get into that finite detail. Standard bench depth will be 600 on the rear benches. In an island, I'll get to an island bench in a moment. Then you've got your kicker or kick board underneath. So that's at the bottom of the cabinetry. That's generally anywhere between 90 and 150 millimeters. And it's set back, so it's recessed back from the front of the cabinetry about 50 mil. Overhead cupboards, we get asked this a lot, or how deep should they be? Generally speaking, they're anywhere between 3 and 350. And that's really to enable you not to hit your head. When you've got a 600 depth, you've got those overhead cupboards recessed back a little bit so that, 20, 25 centimeters, so that you can actually, work at that surface and not actually bump your head on the overhead cupboards. I generally like to have them at 350. That means that an extra glass in there or whatever is great. So, and generally you'll find that if you are storing plates up there, it's a better depth. Generally, you won't be storing plates overhead these days anyway. They'll go into drawers. With regards to your island bench, ideally, I like to have them at 1 metre wide. Now, in apartments, that may not be achievable, so then they'd be 800, 900, but really, ideally, I like to have them a minimum of 1 metre. And depending on the design, we've designed some square island benches or ones that are longer. When rather than being laterally long in the kitchen, they're actually longer the other way around, so that you've got a really good area at the end for dining, so that people can sit there really easily with 4 and you're not actually in the kitchen. But if you've got a lateral island bench, you generally be looking at 1 metre. 1.2 is, or 1 to 1.2 is a really good depth. But really, that can be however you want it to be. The overhang, though, is important. An overhang of 100, 200 mil is really not enough. So when you've got it at 1 metre, that means, obviously, with the drawers being 600, it means that you've got a 400 overhang. I find that's a really good overhang amount because you can tuck the stools in there really nicely and have a really clean finish. 300 is also sufficient. So on a 900 millimetre bench top, you would then have a 300 millimetre overhang. Bench top thicknesses, now that really comes down to the material that you're using. Decton would be anywhere between 6 and 20 mil, and you can build that up as well to be deeper, higher if you wanted it to. If you're using a laminate bench top, that's going to be a standard 33 millimetre thickness of your bench top. And other stones, reconstituted stones, that they generally come in 20, 30, 40, they get built up, and 60. In the 90s, having the deepest bench top, 100 mil bench top, 120 mil bench top was seen as very prestigious. Now it's, 40 to 60 if you wanted to make your island bench a feature. If you've got a particularly stunning natural stone, you can definitely build that up and make it thicker and have it as a feature. We generally have our rear benches as 20 mil, and you can also have exactly the same on your island bench, 20 to 25 mil. If you're using a solid acrylic surface, it can be any depth that you want it to be. So sometimes you might have a feature of your island of about 40 mil, and then on the back benches, you may have it 20 mil. Appliances. Now, ideally, from a usability perspective, it's better to have your microwaves either on the bench or overhead rather than underneath the bench tops. And your standard dishwasher is 600. Now, all these appliances are standard. So a dishwasher is standard 600. You can get a small dishwasher at 450. They're really big in Europe, and I had a 450 because space is so tight in Europe. They're quite expensive here, so I don't really see the point. I think in the time that I've been here for over 10 years, I think I've installed one. And that really was, the lady really didn't need a 600. But I would, from a cost perspective and a space perspective in Australia, 600 is fine. A standard wall oven is 600. You can get them 750. I've had to break a lot of people's hearts and let them know that if they want a wall oven and they also want to have a 900 millimeter oven, at this point in time, they're not available. You can get 750 and 800 going up into a wall oven space, but 900 is not possible. So if you really want to have a 900 oven, it needs to be an undermount. It needs to go under the bench. Freestandings can also be 600, 750, 800, 900. So you've got a lot more flexibility when it's a freestanding oven. Wall ovens are generally 600, and then you can stack them. Steam ovens again, 600. Integrated coffee machines, 600. So 600 really is this constant measurement, a very consistent management on a lot of the appliances. Your fridge cavity. Now, ideally, you'd go and get your fridge first. If you want to future-proof your space, I would never design a kitchen without the cavity being at least a metre, because that's going to then have your standard 900 fridge that's able to fit in there, and I'd have it at 800, 1800 high if you don't know the height. Now, some fridges are a bit lower, some fridges are a bit higher, which is why it's a really good idea to work out what fridge you're going to have. And even if you've got a fridge that's say 800, I would still future-proof that cavity and make sure that it is a metre, so that if you did want to upgrade your fridge, that you could do that. Now, a lot of the double door fridges, they are 900, but some of them are now getting even bigger and they're 1200. So your cavity needs to be 10 millimeters bigger than the actual size of the fridge, because the fridge needs air around it to work properly. Sinks. Double sink allow about 800 and allow a depth of about 480. And again, if you're thinking about that's going on a bench of 600, you need space around it. You may also have a bench mounted tap. If space is an issue, you may then have the tap mounted in the sink if your sinks are particularly deep. But you need to have that space. You can't have 5 mil of reconstituted stone behind your sink. You need to have a little bit more space than that. Now, I think that's about it. They're the main ones. This is a much shorter podcast today than normal. They're the main measurements that you'll need. It's really important. Keep that 7 meters in your mind in terms of working between all the key areas in your kitchen. And just keep in mind that when you open the fridge, you can't open the fridge and open up and turn around onto a sink if your sink's in the island bench. We actually had this conversation with a client last week because he's left-handed. He couldn't, it was really difficult for him to work with the fridge on the right-hand side of the island bench. But the fridge was positioned at the end of the kitchen, which is ideal, which we've talked about in other seasons. So we've had the sink right aligned on the island bench so that when he opens the fridge, he's got a free piece of bench space that he can then put things out of the fridge onto the bench. Now, if the sink was there, that means he opens up the fridge and it goes straight, he's got his sink there, so it gets in the way. So you always need to make sure that you've got bench space when you're using all of your appliances. And that's a really key thing to keep in mind about how that kitchen is going to flow, rather than get fixated on this triangle shape. That's not as important as making sure that you've got bench right next to all the appliances and the elements that you're going to be using when you're preparing food. Now, don't forget, super exciting, because we've actually got a name for our course, and that is the Beautiful Kitchen Design Made Easy. And that's going to be a short course with some key checklists and printables for you that you're able to use so that you can make your selections, so that you can plan your kitchen. You've got an idea of your budget. The waitlist is open. The waitlist is at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au/kitchen design online course. And that's where you will be able to key in your details, and you will be able to register for when that course opens, which is going to be in September. Top secret what date it's going to be. It's going to be a really affordable course so that you're able to get all the information that you need. There'll be all the transcripts from the podcast so that you can highlight, make notes. Everything will be there in terms of what you need to get yourself set up. So make sure you put yourself on the wait list so you're the first to find out about the special offer that will be coming out very soon. As always, book a chat with me, always available for you if you need to have a chat about your project and how we can assist you. So by all means, get access to my diary on the website for that as well at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au. I will be here next week. As always, don't forget there's Forever Home Live on Friday, 9:30 on the Forever Home Facebook page and on the White Pebble Interiors Instagram page. Over and out for now. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.